And we are recording the presentation. So tonight's presentation is called Skies, the Silent Threat of Light Pollution, which is a problem that is worldwide and has many layers to it. So that is why we have a wonderful group of people here to speak about it and some of the things that are being done to fight it. First, I would like to introduce Mary Hogue, who's from the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force. We also have RTM representative Jill Vergara here this evening. Thank you so much for your time. She will be speaking. And we have Shannon Calver, who's the president of the Westport Astronomical Society, which is also going to be a very informative part of the evening. But I'm going to start with Mary so she can tell us a little bit more about the program she's been doing and pulling people together to talk about this issue.
Westport Astronomical Society.
Hi, I guess first request is anybody who's not presenting, if you could put yourself on mute, that would be really helpful for everyone else, if you know how to do that. And yes, I'm Mary Hogue. I'm the secretary for the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force. And we consider dark skies as part of the pollinator pathway. I don't know if everyone's aware of that. Pollinator pathway in Fairfield is under the Forestry Committee. I'm the chair of that. And the reason we think of that is because pollinators are really affected by the light as we are as humans. And Shannon is going to be telling us all about that. We're so honored and excited to have Shannon. He came enthusiastically and very quickly responded to our request. He is the president of the Westport Astronomical Society, and he has a website, higherimagination.com. Higher is spelled H-I-R-E, imagination.com, and you can see his wonderful photography there. You'll see some of the photos in his presentation. What you'll find in this presentation is really surprising. I don't know, but you'll learn a lot. That I learned a lot from finding out about this, and I hope you'll be asking questions as we go through, either in the chat or by raising your hand and afterwards. And we'll also be finding out what we'll be doing in Fairfield and perhaps hearing more about what other towns and communities are doing around the country and in Connecticut. So here you go, Shannon.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And thanks everybody for coming. It's a big crowd. I don't know how many are in right now, but everybody can just scooch their chairs closer together so we can fit them all. So we are here to talk about light pollution, which, as you can see from this beginning slide, is a glaring problem. And this is a terrible example of it from the Mario Cuomo Bridge, the former Tappan Zee Bridge. And this is a photo that I took a year and a half ago when I was out shooting, looking for the Neowise comet. And as you can see, there is a lot of light going up into the sky. There's probably more light in the clouds than there is on the things that they're actually trying to light up. So there's a lot of waste, and you can see just how much of a problem there is in the sky. So I was out there to shoot this comet. If you remember, it was a big deal in 2020. And it's right up here, if you can see my cursor. This is a naked eye comet, but because there's so much light pollution in this area, it was actually hard to see. It took two of us down there a while to find it, even though it should have been obvious. And it's just because there's so much glare in the sky that you can't really see much in the way of stars. There's a few here, that's about it. So this is my hobby. I go out shooting deep sky objects all the time. I would be out tonight if I wasn't doing this presentation because it's clear and it's a new moon. So this is the Orion Nebula with the Running Man on this side and the bigger part of the Orion Nebula on that side. This is the North America Nebula and the Pelican Nebula. This is the Pinwheel Galaxy, M101. So I'm just showing a few examples. All of these were shot in Westport. Most of them with a very small telescope. This is the Trifid Nebula and the Lagoon Nebula. And this is the Andromeda Galaxy. So you might think that it would take this super huge telescope and NASA level equipment to do this. It doesn't. This particular galaxy is about 6 times the size of the full moon in the sky. It's huge. It's really, really big. But we can't see all of it because there's so much glare in the sky from here. So if you go to a really, really dark site, which I did once in Vermont, it looks like that through binoculars. You can see it. You can't pick up the color because there's not enough brightness to activate the cones in your eyes, but you can see it like almost like a black and white photo. And it's so big that you have to pan from side to side to see the whole thing in binoculars. It's huge. Around here though, it looks like that. Because there's so much light being thrown up into the sky that it reduces the contrast. There's so much glare that you lose everything, and all you can see is this core in the center, and maybe a couple of these little satellite galaxies on a good night. This should be a naked eye object. And there's a few times around here where you can see just this core barely on a really clear dark night, like tonight. You might be able to pick this out if you know where to look. But this should be readily visible. This is the most distant object that the human eye can see, usually. It's about 2.5 million light years away. And this is why we can't see it from here. Light pollution, very obvious light pollution, and lots of it. Look how much that we're throwing up into the sky. This view might be a little bit exaggerated, but not by much. This is a NASA satellite view. And you can see how much the cities are lit up, especially on the East Coast, and especially in our area. Look at all the bright cities. You can pick out Chicago, Atlanta, Denver, Minneapolis. They're really obvious. They take up a lot of area. And there's even some unusual things. If you can see where my cursor is up here, anybody guess what that is? This is a huge area of light in North Dakota that's bigger than Chicago. It's almost as big as the New York metro area.
I think I know what it is, Shannon.
Yes, I'll bet you do, Mr. from the Dakotas.
Right. No, that is Williston, North Dakota, and that's where all the where they're outgassing all the methane, and that's just lit up all around the oil field up there.
It's just fire. They're just burning off all the excess methane.
Yeah, it's just fire.
So all that light that looks like a big city is just flames from oil refineries. That's crazy. Not only is it wasting light, it's wasting the gas. So here's our local area. And don't be fooled by these dark areas here. They're not dark. It's just showing the really lit up parts. This whole region is super, super bright. There's just no dark sky to be found in this area. This is a shot of Los Angeles. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of light pollution there. Great big area, huge, densely populated, built up area. In 1994, when they had the Northridge earthquake in the middle of the night, it knocked out the power to the city. So you had a huge power outage, lots of shaking in the middle of the night, woke people up. They ran outside. And then the police started getting phone calls on 911 because of these strange silvery clouds in the sky. And it was the Milky Way, because these people are not used to seeing the Milky Way. You can hardly see any stars at all. So all of a sudden they're panicked. There's this strange stuff in the sky, and it's just the Milky Way. 70% of Americans have never seen the Milky Way from their home. That's nuts. It should be available to everyone when you look up. It's right there. We're in the galaxy. And very few of us can see it. Certainly nobody in this area. We can get a little glimmer of it from my house on a dark night because I happen to live in one of the darker areas of Fairfield County. But It's very limited. There's almost nothing that you can see in the sky other than the brightest stars. This is another example. This is from a power outage that happened in 2003. This was in Ontario, Canada. And you can see all the light from Ontario in the background here. And then when the power went out and Ontario is not lit up, all of a sudden you've got the sky. And this is what we've lost. We're losing more and more of it every year, something like 2% more light going up into the sky as light pollution every year. So for me, obviously, it's a problem for photography, but this is more than just about our view of the stars. We're wasting billions of dollars in energy. You have to generate that energy, which means CO2 emissions and bad weather like the snowstorm we just had. It causes sleep disorders and health risks in people, pretty major ones. It disrupts the natural cycles of plants and animals a lot more than you might think. I mean, we've spent billions of years evolving to have this natural cycle of light and dark and the lunar cycles, and that's it. And then just in the past couple of hundreds of years, you've got light all the time. And life isn't just used to that all of a sudden. So here's an example of the energy waste. This is a graphic I found that has a lot of information on it. But you can see 13% of residential electricity in the US is used for outdoor lighting. And a lot of that is just going straight up. It's not lighting up anything specific or useful. It's just going up in the air. 35% of it is wasted by unshielded or poorly aimed lighting. And that means about $3 billion per year worth of energy lost to sky glow. I think this graphic is from 2011, so the numbers are higher now. 15 million tons of CO2 are emitted each year in order to power this residential outdoor lighting. 15 million tons of CO2. That's like 3 million extra passenger cars on the road, 40,000 tons a day. Just wasted and polluting. This gives you an idea of how fast it's growing too. This was the late 1950s, mid 1970s, 1997. This, I guess, is a projection since we're not at 2025 yet, but you get the idea. We're lighting up not just the United States, but the world rapidly. 49% increase from 1992 to 2017. And here's some examples of the worst offenders. I'm sure you've all seen billboards that are lighting up the streets and the highways as you're driving through. All this light going up in the air. Yes, you're lighting up the billboard, but you're also lighting up this whole area around it because these lights are just pointed up and they're bouncing off the billboard and just going off into space. This is one of my pet peeves. Up lights on the trees. Why? Why are we shining lights up at the trees? I mean, yeah, they look pretty, but unless this is a museum display of the last two examples of the ivory-billed maple, this is ridiculous. Why would you waste this kind of light? It costs money, and you're just shining it up at the landing gear of airplanes and bird bellies. We have different degrees of lighting, different types of lighting, and you can see they go from very bad to best. The really bad stuff just shines in every direction. So all the light, all the energy you're producing is just going off in every direction, which is usually not where you want to point it. Anything going up is just lost. The best light would be shining down, or at least directionally, on whatever it is you're trying to illuminate. Here's another bad source of light, and we've all seen them on floodlights on houses, security lights, motion detectors. They make lousy neighbors. They shine into your bedroom or across the street. And people think they have to have these for security. The brighter it is, the more you light up the yard, it's less inviting to burglars. But more light isn't necessarily safer. Because here's a guy that was standing here the whole time and you might have missed him. because the glare from the light actually makes it harder to see, not easier. Even this, you can see they just covered up the light, but even this, it's just too bright. Here's an example of full cutoff fixtures. And you can see on the left, on these bright red lights, a lot of light is just going up. You can see it on the top shining up. That's cut off on the right side, and it becomes a lot clearer, uses a lot less electricity, a lot less light, and yet you can see better. Cities are rapidly switching to efficient LED lights, and this seems like a good thing. You can get a sense from the before and after. It looks cleaner, less hazy, it sort of cuts through the yellow light. But it's not necessarily a good thing. Outdoor lamps could actually increase the light pollution because they tend to be blue light, especially the older LEDs. I'm sure you notice this on Christmas decorations. When you go outside, you don't have that warm glow that you used to have. It's a lot of cold blue light, and that blue light is just terrible for your eyes. It's 5 times more disruptive to sleep cycles. It increases glare, and it might actually damage your eyesight. There's more energy in blue light, so it's more harmful to your eyes. It will constrict your pupils so that you lose your night vision and you can't see as well in the dark. So the irony is the brighter blue light actually makes it harder to see at night. This is why observatories have red lights, because they won't disrupt your night vision. The light pollution can interfere with human circadian rhythms and melatonin release. Melatonin is only released when it's dark, apparently. So when you have light shining in through your window, or even just standby lights for the TV or your alarm clock or a power strip on the floor, all that light can interfere with your sleep. And this in turn is linked to obesity, depression, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, potentially cancer, whole host of problems just from having too much light. Because it's supposed to be dark when we sleep. That's what we were evolved to do. And it's not just humans. Obviously, nighttime creatures, bats, owls, foxes, moths, any kind of insect that's out at night is going to be disrupted by this. Migratory birds, owls. Something I didn't know is that 80% of bird migrations take place at night. I mean, I'm used to seeing flights of geese in the daytime, the big V-shaped formations, and oh, it's birds migrating south, but we hardly see any of the migrations. The big migrations happen at night. And this is something that I sort of learned by accident at the observatory. A lot of times in October, I'd be looking through the telescope at the moon, and very often you see birds flying across the moon. And it took me a while to figure out, what is that? You just see this little speck going across the moon, and lots of them. And I realized that those are birds at night. We just don't think of birds flying around at night. I used to think of them as roosting, but they do. And artificial lights disorient migratory birds and kill millions every year. And when I say millions, the number is something like 100 million just in the United States. That's a lot of birds lost. Here's one of the worst offenders, stadium lights. These are terrible. And I'm sure as you've gone down the road and you look to the side when it's supposed to be dark, and you'll see this big dome out in the middle of nowhere, and you realize that's a baseball field or football field or park that's lit up at night. And you get this bright dome of light over the trees. And within those lights, obviously, you get the bugs. moths, mosquitoes, beetles, anything that flies around at night is going to get confused. It's attracted to the light, swarms around the lights all night, or at least as long as they're on, and it uses up the energy, and whatever else they were supposed to be doing instead of flying around the lights, they're not doing. So you lose those insects. A University of Bern study found nearly 300 nocturnal insect species visiting the flowers of around 60 plant species on meadows without any artificial light sources. This was in the subalpine meadows in Switzerland, I believe. When they put in LED street lights as an experiment, the nocturnal pollination visits were 62% lower. You lost 62% of the pollinators at night on the flowers, which means less fruit, less flowers, and that's not made up by insects in the daytime. You know, bees don't take over the extra load there. And not only that, but they found that it weakens the plants as well. They're not exactly sure why, but they think it's because since they're not getting visited as often by insects at night, they're producing less nectar. And it weakens the plant, and then there's less nutrition for the daytime insects. Everybody loses. It's not even just insects and animals. Plants are vulnerable. As I said, you get less nectar if you're not visited at night, but here's an example. It's a low resolution photo, but this is an example from Long Island of a tree that you can see near the light has not dropped its leaves because you've got this extra light. So the deciduous tree is not dropping his leaves as early as the rest of the tree is, and you're weakening the tree. So in areas around cities, the leaves stay on the trees longer and the trees get weaker. So there's a whole range of things to consider rather than just how much light you're putting in. It's where you're directing it, the shielding, the color temperature, that it's not too blue. The American Medical Association recommended that lights not be any cooler than 3,000 degrees, because beyond that, you create health problems. So this is a big deal. And a lot of towns and even countries are starting to ban LED lights that are cooler than 3,000 degrees. The intensity is obviously a big deal. It doesn't have to be as bright as you can get it. Certainly if you're using LED lights, it can be a third as bright or a third of the wattage that you would expect from a regular incandescent bulb. And timing also helps. If you can put a dimmer or a timer on it, a lot of times these lights don't have to be on 24/7. There's a partial list of towns in the area that have light pollution ordinances. This is just in Connecticut. Now, Connecticut was actually early to the game with coming up with light pollution ordinances. In 2001, they were one of the first states. It's pretty limited, but they do have some limits on the amount and types of lights that you can have. Basic regulations include shielding requirements, light trespass restrictions, limits on glare. Additional regulation steps, lighting plans and the site plan. If you're going to build something, some communities will expect you to present some kind of plan to show how you're going to handle the lighting. There are restrictions on floodlights in some areas.
Hey, Shannon, can you explain light trespass? That's an unusual term.
Sure, I can. And actually I can, well, let's see. Right here would be light trespass. If you happen to have the house next door and your windows over there, this is going to be shining in your window. Like, hang on. Well, I had a slide for it here.
Sorry.
No. There, that's light trespass.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, if you have a street light outside your window or a neighbor with a porch light that's on constantly, that's light trespass. And it's not enough to say, well, I'll just put a hedge there or a fence. A light shouldn't be doing that. There's no reason for it. Even if the neighbor wants to have a brightly lit porch or driveway for security, it should be aimed down, not in the neighbor's window. So let's go back here. Okay, so as I was pointing out, some of the towns in the area do have some types of light regulations, light pollution regulations. Some of these were actually surprising to me. I wouldn't expect Milford or Brookfield, which to me seem really brightly lit, to have these kind of regulations. However, in many cases, this is regulations going forward. It's not going to help with lights that are already in existence. So if there's a lot of houses that have outdoor uplights or fixtures that are just completely exposed on the top, it doesn't usually affect those. What it will affect is new construction and municipal lights that are changed out. So full cutoff aesthetic lighting is an example of something going forward that would be helpful. So you don't have those up lights shining up at trees or lighting up your house from the bottom, especially floodlights going up. Light should be directed where it's supposed to go, where you want to actually light up and not waste the electricity and light up the sky. Hopefully we can do something like this for Fairfield and Westport and Norwalk, because that helps not just the towns and the people within them, but of course the observatory, which affects me, a little personal stake in it. If anybody is interested in seeing some of these things, the Westport Astronomical Society has an observatory in Westport. We are normally open every Wednesday from 8 to 10 if it's clear outside. Right now we've got some restrictions because of COVID, because the infection rates were so high. But hopefully soon we'll be back to opening on a regular basis, and hopefully it will warm up a little bit. There's also the Discovery Museum in Fairfield, which is now the Discovery Science Center and Planetarium as part of Sacred Heart University. They have a world-class planetarium there that's the best I've ever seen. That's just amazing what they can do and what they can show you. You can see what the sky is actually supposed to look like versus what we have. So hopefully people will take an interest in that and come to appreciate the night sky and help us to preserve it a little bit. So I would like to take any questions you may have.
So at your meetings on Wednesdays at the Astronomical Society, what happens there? What goes on?
Well, we have a dome over here. You can see the tower. This is actually a Cold War era radar tower for Nike missiles that we put a dome on back in 1967, I believe. And since then, every Wednesday, at least up until the pandemic, if it was clear, people just come out. It's free. You can go up in the tower and look through the telescope and we'll show you what's out there. It could be galaxies, planets, the moon, whatever's available. There's also a little pad here in the foreground that we bring out an even bigger telescope on the ground. That's the largest telescope in Connecticut that's available to the public. So we can show you a lot. Not as much as we could if the sky was dark, but we can still show quite a bit. So we encourage people to come out and just take a peek and hopefully gain an appreciation for the sky and science.
So no prior knowledge required?
Absolutely not. We will explain everything and answer any questions.
Great.
Actually, I'd give you an example of that. Let me just go back here. Come on, click. I don't know what's clicking. There we go. I'll give you an observatory question example. All right, so here's a picture of the United States at night from space. One of the examples we get, one of the questions we get at the observatory very often is about UFOs. And if you look at this picture, this is what a spaceship coming to visit Earth would see. Now, how likely is it aliens would just say, oh, look at that. Let's pick up a cow in Iowa and draw circles in a cornfield. No, they're going to go to the bright spots. That's the interesting stuff. And then we'd have millions of eyewitnesses. So this is actually a great example of why there are not aliens visiting the world. Because they would be on these really bright, interesting things. So any other questions?
I see our TAM representative, Jill Bargera, has her hand raised. So Jill, would you like to say something?
Thanks. So Shannon, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, and I think this is true. I did some research on other towns, and I found that Westport does have a regulation that became effective at the end of this month. I think it became effective January 28th, 2022. So they have progressed to a point further than Fairfield has, where they're regulating specifically lights, and it's all exterior lights, and it's a very minimal regulation, but at least it's something on their zoning regs.
I have not heard of that, but I appreciate any kind of start. There are street lights right at the bottom of the driveway from the observatory that are really bright, and they're not full cutoff. So even right at the observatory in Westport, we get hurt by town pollution.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same situation that you were talking about, where it only applies to new installations, this regulation. So
Right.
it's a start.
As Dan says, many regulations are rarely enforced. And that's one of the things that when we talked in Fairfield, that as Sustainable Fairfield, we are interested in doing this kind of education and outreach, and have been talking with our zoning department to create informational material to leave at the zoning department, and to do more partnering with the library and with the school system and with anyone else who's on that would be interested in hosting us, to get the word out and to get people informed and perhaps interested, and to spread the word, because I didn't know many of these things, and the idea that something was brighter was safer, and the idea that that's not true is really profoundly powerful for me. And knowing that having the right amount of light shining in the right way is much safer is really powerful. So having the Kelvin or the kind of light, the light that's more in the warm range is better in terms of our health, and in terms of the health of our animals is also very important. And it really, having timing is also so helpful. So all these little things add up so much.
Lyme, Connecticut.
So those are simple little things that we all could be doing, that and you know, if we change out our lighting fixtures so that they're IDA compliant with that logo that you were showing earlier, Shannon, those are kinds of things that would be so helpful for people to know. So I think if we had, like, you know, the top 5 tips to follow, you know, I don't think people even realize that those things happen, you know, that they're available. I don't know if anyone has any suggestions. How do we connect with Shannon? How do you connect with Shannon, Shannon?
Well, you can reach me through the observatory website, was-ct.org. Or if we're open on a Wednesday, you can just come out and see me. I'm usually there. So I learned a lot just going through this. For example, I'm certainly used to seeing bugs flying around street lights and floodlights and stadium lights. And a lot of times you'll look at the cloud and go, wow, that's a lot of bugs there. But you never stop to think about, if they're at that light, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So any bug flying around a street light isn't doing bug things. It's supposed to be out in the grass and the fields and pollinating flowers and making other bugs. I mean, think about fireflies getting confused by these lights. You go outside with a flashlight, wave it around, you can see all the fireflies just lighting it up like a wave at a stadium. But they think you're a firefly, so it's just hurting them.
So someone asked, is why LED light is so bad for light pollution? Could you go back to that comment again one more time?
If I can get my slideshow to do that. There we go.
And I got into the whole Kelvin. I don't think you covered that light warmth and
Right.
stuff the way
So these are LED lights, and you can see how blue they are. And I'm sure you've seen this on car headlights. On the road, a lot of times you'll see a car coming to you that has really bright blue lights. And it almost looks like they have high beams on, even though they don't. And the light may actually be less intense than it would be with a regular halogen or incandescent light. But because it's blue, that blue light has more energy. It's a higher frequency light. It carries more energy. So if you think of it as having more impact on your eyeballs, so it constricts your eyeballs, it constricts the pupils in your eyeballs. So you can't take in as much light because your eyes are reacting to that blue light, and it actually reduces your night vision. In addition to that, there are physical effects. The fovea in the back of your retina is tinted yellow. And the reason for that is to sort of counteract the blue light, ultraviolet and the far blue light, so it doesn't damage your retina. Blue light's bad stuff.
Shannon, could you give us some advice on if I want to reconfigure my outdoor lighting on my house, what kind of lighting to look for? And within that lighting, what kind of bulbs should I replace the bulbs I have with yellow lights or leave soft white lights? What am I looking for?
Well, the most important thing is the fixture. You want to make sure that the light is not straying where you're not trying to direct it. If the fixture is open on the top, that's bad. You want to have at least semi-cutoff so that it's not being directed up, so that any light is going down or towards whatever you're trying to point it at. As an example, let's find out. Let's see here. Well, this isn't the slide I was looking for, but you still get the idea. So if you're directing light down towards your porch, your patio, your garage, whatever, all this light going up is wasted. So if this was a bare bulb on the porch, for instance, and a lot of that light's going up, 50% of it, if it's a bare bulb, is completely wasted. So half your electricity, half your lighting is just being thrown away. So you want to have some kind of cutoff, ideally full cutoff, so that it's pointed down. And then beyond that, just making sure that the light is sufficient for what you need and not too bright, and that the color temperature is not too cool. I mean, it's okay if it's kind of a natural light, but if it's really blue, that's bad. It's hurting your eyes.
Would yellow light bulbs be the best choice for outdoor lights?
Probably, yes. Yeah, you want to look for the color temperature. It should be below 4,000, ideally below 3,000, but at least below 4,000.
I see.
Amanda, I see you've had your hand up for a bit. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you so much, Shannon. This is so interesting. I've learned so much. I had a question about, sorry, I'm also keeping my child up too late. But I had a question about where you think the best place to get information would be. Would it be on that Dark Skies website? Because here in town, there's a master plan going on, a 10-year master plan for the Parks and Recreation Department, and they're doing a lot of rethinking about fields and lighting and paddle courts and pickleball courts and basketball courts. And so I'm really interested and active with the pollinator pathway here in town. So I'm very concerned that this isn't really being factored into the plan. I'm not 100% sure it's not being factored in, but I'm not sure it is being factored in. So I definitely want to be in touch with the Parks Department here, but what would you recommend for the best sites and sources for information?
Well, the primary source would be the International Dark Sky Association. They're the
Okay.
authorities on this. And I believe Mary mentioned that there's some printed materials that the library has that they've received from them. So you may be able to just go to the library and pick up pamphlets that discuss different aspects of this. But at the very least, you can go to their website. I'm sure you can reach out to them. I'm sure they have some kind of contact information, and they'll be happy to answer any questions because they're heavily invested in preserving the night sky.
Yes, Mary was kind enough to drop off some really interesting pamphlets, Light Pollution, Waste Energy and Money, Protect the Night, about outdoor lighting, light pollution. So if you come into the Fairfield Woods branch, we have those there.
And they're all on the Dark Sky website that I posted in the chat, darksky.org. So you can also download them directly as well.
Just gonna go back to this for 1 second. There we go. This example should just be one of the most striking differences that you can see with light pollution. This is exactly like if you were having a slideshow in a dark room and somebody comes in and throws the light on. All of a sudden you can't see what's on the screen. And it's the same thing with the night sky. When you have all this light being thrown up at your screen, you can't see the things that you're trying to look at. And this applies not just to space, but also to your yard or to whatever it is that you're trying to see. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I've been reading books on my cell phone, and from what you're saying, it's not a good thing for your eyes.
It's probably not ideal. The difference would be something like a, I forget what they're called at the moment, but the ink pads, not an iPad, but the other ones where it uses sort of a electronic ink. Those are
Kindles?
great for your eyes. Yes, Kindles.
Oh, Kindles.
Kindles from Amazon, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Those won't hurt your eyes at all. The other thing you can do is just have yellow tinted glasses. They make glasses for computer screens or filters that you can put on your glasses that sort of filter out that blue light. That's the simplest approach.
Interesting.
There's also a setting on some tablets called Nightshade that when you click it, it changes the light color so you can fall asleep more naturally.
What about Libby? It's the same thing as Kindle.
Then yes, if it's the same technology, the same thing would apply.
I think actually, just from my experience at the library, helping people with the different e-readers, Joyce, a lot of people and the app that you use through the library is called Libby. And a lot of people use many different devices, a phone or an iPad or other tablet to read. And we will hear that, but, one of the differences with the Kindle, not the tablet, is that ink display. And time again, you'll hear people say that they can read much longer with that when they're just using a simple Kindle as opposed to something, like an iPhone or iPad. Joyce, I think that's maybe what you're referring to with Libby.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I use Libby on my Android cell phone.
Right. So if you might want to try, if you have a friend who has a Kindle, or in the past we've had some at the library that you could try out and just give it and see how you like it. For your eyes.
Right, thank you.
Also a good opportunity to plug the library, good old fashioned books.
Well, yes, there is that. Yep. But I think when she brings that up, for me, just not knowing really too much about this, and this has been expressed, I think Mary mentioned this, but it just gives you such a different way of looking at lighting, whether it is the safety issue or, you kind of take it for granted. It's like, oh, I didn't know that I was supposed to be able to go out and see the Milky Way. And now I will never be able to not think that. And I will, when you see the difference between a light that is just pointing up as that's directed down, it's very, very interesting. And again, I think when you're talking about new buildings and things like that, there are so many rules and regulations, and but you don't often hear about lighting. So
one of the most common questions we get at the observatory is, can you see the Milky Way? And that's sad.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a question. Everybody should be able to see the Milky Way.
Yeah, just be able to go out and see it.
Well, a good first step, Shannon, is you can check out Lowe's or Amazon or Home Depot, and dark skies compliant porch lights and backlights can be had for $19 on up.
Yes. Yeah, they're not necessarily any more expensive than regular lights. They're just designed to direct that light where you want it.
And see.
Yeah, there you go.
My
one of the
colleagues,
things that I thought was interesting, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
As I'm going through this and I'm finding images to use for the slideshow, I would find an image on a dark sky site of really bad lighting, like the blue light from the street lights, and then find that exact same photo on LED light manufacturers bragging about how bright it is and how bright the light is. So it's like completely opposing views there.
Viewpoints with the same image.
Same image.
Does anyone have any more questions? Just want to make sure. There's some great information in the chat. And some very nice feedback. Thank you so much to everyone. I just want to make sure if anyone has any final comments or thoughts.
I just want to thank Shannon so much, and to really encourage people to go to the Westport Astronomical Society and the Discovery Planetarium, when it's open and possible, because they're really great local resources. And I don't know if you're aware of them, but they're amazing and they're so close. And the library has all sorts of wonderful resources as well. So we're really lucky to have these things right in our backyards, basically. And, thinking about how it's so easy to make these little changes in our own lives, and spread the word that maybe if we all did a little change in our homes, we could maybe see the Milky Way. That would be lovely. So
yes, it would. We had an event a couple of years ago where members would come out with binoculars, and I would just use a laser pointer and say, look here, look here, look here. And you can see galaxies, you can see nebula with just binoculars. And it had to be a really clear night to do that, but it should be routine. It should be easy. And I remember when I first came to Connecticut, which would be 1998, the light pollution wasn't as bad even then. And I could see certain things with my naked eye that I can't see now.
Well, I also wanted to thank you, Shannon. I thought this was a great presentation, and you kind of took the wind out of everything, all of the outline that I had prepared, because you touched on almost everything that I wanted to say. But I think that this is a good way to open up the conversation to the community and think about potential regulations here in Fairfield. I do think that it's a really important issue. It touches on our well-being, our environment, our pocketbooks. And so I've had a situation where I had a constituent come to me with an issue, with a nuisance issue with light that kind of opened this door to me, and I started researching that. So a lot of communities have done this. They're in their zoning regs, and it's a kind of question for Fairfield about whether we're going to approach this through zoning regulation, through a potential ordinance through our legislative body, the RTM. We can do it through education also, like Mary was saying, with pamphlets. We can do advocacy work like Amanda raised with anything that comes up at the town level, like that 10-year plan for our Parks and Rec. There's also a plan of conservation and development being revised right now, and it's a great opportunity for us as a community to try to talk about our priorities, and this might be one of our priorities for getting that into our plan of conservation and development, this issue of light pollution, and potentially trying to get the zoning commission to see that it's an issue and to try to write it into our zoning regs. So there are a lot of different angles, and we should keep that conversation going.
I hope so. That sounds great. I mean, it's really a win-win. There's no downside to regulating light pollution because you're using less energy. It's less costly. The fixtures don't have to be ugly. They can be just as pretty as any other fixture and cost the same amount. But if you're cognizant of the light pollution, it's easier on everybody. You save your health, you save money, you save energy, save the pollinators.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you.
this, as with so many environmental issues, it's just so interconnected. And like you said, it's a win-win. You make one little change and you don't want to become overwhelmed and think, oh, it's so big of an issue, there's really nothing I can do. But I think that's another thing we have to learn, is that every little thing that we do does a difference and helps.
There's not too many butterfly effects that can save actual butterflies. This is one of them.
The moths, yeah.
Thank you all for bringing this to our attention.
Well,
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for joining us.
And I know in the chat we saw, Shannon, your photos are actually, they're quite beautiful, and they really are. This is just stunning to look at. So thank you so much for sharing and your expertise and your time. And if there are no final thoughts, say goodnight to everyone, and please be well and come to the library for more info and find out what you can do to help.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Many thanks to all.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night.
Be well.
night.